everybody on the team, everybody, the writer, artist, art director, editor, everybody, ideally they're on the team of team best book. That's the team they're on.
Hey everybody, and welcome to another You May Contribute a Verse. Team Versey is Brenna Jeanneret, author and outdoors mom, podcast wizard Jon Seymour, and me, Josh Monken, science communicator, dad, and author whose dad would be proud at how much this episode talks about superheroes and comics. I respect the hell out of today's guest, Troy Wilson. He writes amazing books today, like Goldie Books and The Wee Bear, or Hat Cat, for example, and he wrote great books 20 years ago, too. This year, April of 2024, in fact, Troy's picture book, Perfect Man, turns 20 years old. And as someone who is hoping to break into the scene himself in the relatively, in publishing terms, near future, I'm really inspired by the ways Perfect Man is still reaching audiences and is still celebrated today. Happy birthday, Perfect Man, and congratulations, Troy. In honor of this auspicious anniversary, Troy is doing a giveaway of a copy of Perfect Man. Obviously, if you're listening to this episode in the distant future, it's probably over by now, and you can still pick up a copy of Perfect Man at most book retailers. But as of early February 2024, head to Twitter, Bluesky, and Threads and share this episode, and tag us, of course, because otherwise we won't see it. By Valentine's Day, we'll pick the winner who loves on this show the hardest. If we get enough winners, I'll contribute a copy of Perfect Man as well, so get out there and share the show. In the meantime, we hope you enjoy this conversation that we had with Troy. Here's Troy's verse. Your audio, Troy, is a delight. Are you using some kind of fancy microphone?
Yeah, it's really good.
I'm using, well, it looks like what you might be using. I'm using Blue Yeti.
Oh, us too.
Okay.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. So yeah. Mm-hmm.
I can only dream of sounding as crisp and baritone on my end. I don't hear myself that way, nor do I hear myself that way when I edit these episodes. But
no, I don't like the sound. The sound of my voice. No fun. No, nobody likes it. Nobody likes the sound of their voice.
I was gonna say nobody really likes to listen to themselves. I mean, luckily I don't have too much of an affliction because when we edit these or like have to re-listen, to post and whatever, it's a lot of like going back and forth. So it's not too bad, but it's not my favorite. So
mm-hmm. Yeah,
it's funny. Yeah. When we started doing this, I sort of knew that podcasting was the hobby for us, or the pastime, or however you want to characterize it for us, because as I edited these episodes, this was even before Brenna joined. As I edited the episodes, I didn't hate the way I sounded, which was it's like a real barrier to entry. If you hate what you're doing, hate the output. So Totally. It was worth pursuing, right?
Totally, which is why I wanted to do a podcast in the first place, honestly, because so many writers have blogs, and I'm like, I don't want to write about writing. That just sounds like so. I just did not have any interest. But like chatting with people and hearing about like their journeys and what they have to say, like that's just like so much more fun.
So much on the same page. Because really, we only have, I think, so much writing energy, and writing about writing is not necessarily how I would want to expend a big chunk of it. I'd rather just expend it on the stuff itself. The chatting interviews I prefer greatly to the written back and forth that I also do. It's nice to be able to refine one's answer and rewrite it ad nauseum and make it sound really great, and you don't have any ums and ahs and all that sort of thing, but at the same time you're writing and it's just sucking some energy away. So from that
we just refine and post. That's why everybody always sounds so good and refined.
There we are.
Perfect.
There we go.
That's why it always sounds like Perfect Man is on the podcast.
Yes.
Perfect Man. Yes.
Totally.
Yes, that way. Perfect Man. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. All right. Well, let's talk about Perfect Man, because so it was the 20th anniversary, right? It came out in 2004.
Yeah, 2004. Exactly. Yeah. And it says in the soft cover, it says 2005, but that was the release of the soft cover. So 2004 was the hardcover. Yeah. Long time ago, really.
Yeah,
Lot has
and
changed.
it still holds up though, because so number one, the story is really fun. So it gave me a lot of Mega Man vibes, like how you get in there and Mega Man just like quits, right? Or sorry, his nemesis quits and he doesn't want to be a superhero anymore. And Mega Mind is sort of like, well, what am I supposed to do? Like, what does a nemesis do? A superhero do if you don't have a nemesis, right? So he's like lost. I got very much like the Mega Man vibes when I was reading it. And also,
Mega Man being the Nintendo character, who I don't think quits.
no, not Mega Man, the other dude.
Right.
Brad Pitt's character quits.
Yeah, no, that's high praise. I love that movie, and this also came out back when I think The Incredibles came out. Was it the same year? Later the same year, something like that. Whereas again, superheroes are quitting, but they're forced to. In that case, it's not a voluntary decision on their part. But I love superheroes quitting stories, and there are a ton of them in comics, and now since Perfect Man came out, lots in film and cartoons and whatever. And it's a great. Oftentimes, it can really there can be some great stuff because you can take it from all kinds of different angles. How that affects the superheroes themselves, how it affects the world, how it affects their foes, and just sort of a life purpose thing too. It's a life change thing, changing one's. I don't know. Well, I guess in Perfect Man's case, it's sort of potentially changing one's approach to how one helps the world, if depending on whether one thinks that Perfect Man actually sort of comes back in the book or not, which is a debatable point. But yeah, no, I love the Megamind movie. It's a real fun one.
Same. And I mean, superheroes quitting is like the ultimate hook, I feel like, right? Because if you're a superhero and then you don't superhero anymore, like what do you do? That just, I mean, I feel like the story just goes from there. Like you're already in it because you're like, well, what happens now? Like you're not doing the thing that you set out to do, right?
Yeah.
Here's pop culture for you. I literally just last night got done with a rewatch of the Prime Video show Invincible. Have either of you watched that?
I haven't watched it. I've read a lot of the comic up to some really crucial plot twisty points. Let's put it that way for that. And yeah, I really like it. I've heard good things about the animated as well. I just haven't gotten to it.
It's very good. Decidedly a lot more blood than in Perfect Man. If I'm comparing the two.
Oh yes.
But it feels salient to talk about because we're in this moment where we've had basically 20 years of Marvel movies, which are enjoyable, but capitalism has forced them down our throats at a pretty steady pace, and they've all been pretty traditionally leveraging that origin story, traditional superhero story. So we're getting reactions. We're getting reactions to that with things like Invincible or things like live action shows like The Boys. So feels like Perfect Man's coming around again to relevance and zeitgeist salience, if that's an appropriate term to use.
Well, and the funny thing about that is it coming around again is that it was inspired, at least from my end, by some really old stuff that I actually don't think most people are aware of. Actually, any of them. I mean, there were three key ones, and one is this quite old comic, like a little 22-page comic, an issue of Green Lantern number 76, released the year I was born, 1970, written by a guy named Denny O'Neil, drawn by Neil Adams, who was huge influence on tons of people. But anyway, this gets to the circuitous route of inspiration, because, okay, this, not a kidlit thing at all. It's a thing where this run of Green Lantern is making it more realistic and more relevant to quote unquote the real world, even though he's a space cop and so forth. Because what the moment of inspiration from that comic was, there's an African-American elderly gentleman who confronts Green Lantern and essentially, I'm paraphrasing here, but essentially says, you're out there caring about and protecting the orange skin people, the blue skin people, and this and that, and you don't really care or aren't really helping out people with black skin, are you? And just confronts him in a way. And weirdly, that got me to thinking, well, what if a kid confronts a superhero about maybe they're not helping as much as they could, and maybe they should, instead of fighting criminals at the crime end, maybe they should be a teacher or something and teach them right at the other end of things and so forth. And that was an interesting thought to me, but the kid was way too adult in terms of how they were expressing things, what they were expressing. So I let that stew for a while, and then there were, I guess, three kids that came into the mix that kind of made it work for me. And one of those kids was myself, because I was a kid who was really, I don't know, obsessed is kind of a negative way to put it, but I was really captivated by comics and reading and all that. And I wasn't much of a person to go out and experience the world. I was in my room reading and writing and imagining. And so, when you see the boy in this story who's the biggest fan of Perfect Man, and maybe he's not actually getting out there in the world to fuel his creative endeavors and so forth. I mean, there's that enters in, and then a couple other obscure inspirations. One is called The Kid Who Collects Spider-Man, who is about Spider-Man's biggest fan. This came out in mid 80s in a comic. It was like a little backup story in a comic, actually, written by a guy named Roger Stern, drawn by Ron Frenz. And it's actually become known as one of the greatest Spider-Man comic stories ever told. And I don't want to go down the road of what actually entirely happens in it, because it's one that's best experienced, just as a lot of stories are. It's best experienced in and of itself. But I mean, it does involve a kid who is a huge fan of Spider-Man and does get to meet Spider-Man, and going on and on here. But the final obscure inspiration is a novel called The Kryptonite Kid. Came out in 1979, though I encountered it in my high school library. Written by, it looks like Joseph Torchia, but I think it's pronounced Torchia. In any event, this is a story about a kid who writes to Superman as if Superman is real, but in this world, Superman isn't. But he's really a huge fan of Superman and writes to him as if Superman is real and so forth. And there's a lot going on in this book too. But I kind of took those huge fan type figures and merged them with myself into the boy in Perfect Man, and then I had something. All of which is to say that inspiration in stories and writing moves in sometimes can move in circuitous paths, and I mean, occasionally they can be pretty direct and pretty straightforward, but they can also be the road can be pretty winding. So that's and I'm a big fan of giving credit where credit is due, and these were my inspirations. And interestingly, with The Incredibles coming out at the same time as Perfect Man, basically, obviously a huge fan of of one of the main superheroes plays a huge role in that too. So it was a really interesting thing where you had superheroes quitting and a big fan, a childhood fan of a superhero playing a huge role. It was kind of cool to see those parallels in a movie that I adore. I adore the first one and the second one.
Well, let me back up and just ask about how it came to be a picture book. Was that always the intention? And I ask that because, I have things that I'm passionate about, and I think my natural inclination I think my version of what you're sort of relaying with Perfect Man would be science fiction novels. Is there some fascinating aspect of Dune or some other, classic sci-fi thing that I could leverage into something that I create and put out into the world? My natural inclination would be and was, when I was in my earlier 30s and taking stabs at doing this to write a novel. So how did you back into or forward into writing for kids, like aiming this toward a kid audience?
Well, it really was backing in because I always wanted to be a writer or a cartoonist when I grew up, say since about like second grade. That's what I wanted, but I didn't really consistently put in the disciplined hard work to get me there. And that's a fairly general, vague goal, be an author, be a cartoonist, an author of what? And so I hit, interesting, you mentioned early 30s, because I hit just after turning 30. It wasn't really the number that prompted it. It was just a feeling. It was just a time where I was like, you know what? I've always wanted to be a published author, a published writer at least. So let's actually put some disciplined time and energy into this. And given that I was starting from ground zero and kind of in a hurry to get somewhere, I thought, well, I was aiming to write short things. And so some of those short things ended up being opinion pieces. Some of them ended up being short little actual reporting, little journalistic stories, like various and sundry things. And since I was writing short, and this idea, I don't know that it's hard to say now when I thought of, hey, let's initially have this kid be rating a superhero, and then it turns into something a little bit different. It's hard to say at that very moment that it occurred to me that I thought picture book exactly. But I mean, I did write it picture book length, and I did submit it as a picture book. So it must
have occurred to you at some point.
It must have occurred to me at some point because it happened. I'm not exactly sure what exactly the point when it was, but I guess really what I figured was, okay, I've got all these short things, and so why can't a picture book be among those things? So I was writing stuff for grown-ups, stuff, this picture book for kids. It was like this array, this army of short pieces that I was sending out into the world in various ways, and that happened to be one of those. And then down the line, what happened was all the other forms of writing that I was doing and trying my hand at, eventually I was like, I've done enough of those. I've done enough of that. And so all of those fell away, and the picture book writing remained. I fell in love with the picture book writing and the picture books and the picture book scene, and stayed on that. And I wasn't that interested in, I don't really need to write a whole lot more in the way of short news stories or even opinion pieces. I wrote a number of them for a local alternative weekly. I don't know, it was probably like at least 5 or more of those got in at various points. But I just was like, there again, I was like, I've only got so much writing energy in me. What do I want to expand that on? And picture books turned out to be the victorious one. I mean, that's not the case for everybody. I mean, there's lots of folks who will write picture books and write this and write that and write many different forms of things, and that's And that's fair too. But I mean, picture books is pretty irresistible as a form, with the page turns and with the lovely art and with the connecting to everyone, everyone from, the super young kids to the oldest grandparents, everybody in between. It's pretty amazing thing to be doing.
So, Troy, I have to ask, so since you were so inspired by these comics growing up, did you ever write any comics? Like, did Perfect Man come out as an actual comic to begin with? And like, did you also do the artwork at some point? Like, do you do that? Do you still draw? Do you still illustrate?
I draw, but the extent that I draw is usually when I autograph copies of my book, I'll draw myself in a cartoony form, as
Yeah,
you
I
are
got
aware.
I got it.
So,
Yeah, let me show Josh.
um,
Here it is.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
right, yeah. So I've had a lot of practice at drawing myself. So, and I'm decent at drawing various things, but I'm also fairly lazy with that. Where I'm disciplined, I found, is with the writing. That's where I'm
Mhm.
disciplined, and I go, okay, I'm really going to hone this skill, and I'm the art. I will draw what I like to draw, and I have no interest in drawing a lot of things.
I mean,
So
because talk about creative bandwidth, right? Like, if you've got creative bandwidth for writing, like personally, I totally identify with what you're saying. Like, I don't have enough creative bandwidth to then also illustrate what I'm writing. Like, art notes are one thing, and that takes some imagination and figuring it out, but like also drawing it and making sure those are also, top notch. It's a lot.
it's a lot. I admire so much folks that do it all,
Yeah.
or do most of it at least. I mean, nobody does it all because everyone's got the editor, art director, all kinds of. It takes a village regardless. So you're never doing it all, but to do both ends, to do the art and the words, that's pretty amazing. But in terms of having done some comics, I have written written a few comics. The tough thing with that, I found, I'd be happy to write more of them. It's just a tough thing in terms of shopping it around in a way, because it is so visual, and
Mhm.
it's all script, and so um, without some art to kind of, it's not like a picture book manuscript in the sense that, I mean, it's just so much art that it's kind of hard to I don't know, convey as easily in a certain way, and shop around in a certain sense. So that's more the barrier for me to doing comics than anything else. But I've done a few just more on a um, sort of a in my leisure, with folks who are also wanting to do a little bit of it in their leisure, as well, and are interested enough in a short little thing to do it and get it into various little small venues and stuff. But ultimately, um, if I wanted to do more of it, I'd have to kind of figure out the pitching of it and a bit better, or I would have to pay some artists to commit to something bigger, pay them for their time and all that kind of stuff. So the interesting thing though about Perfect Man is that the illustrator, he had never drawn a superhero book prior to this, and I had no idea of his interest in the material at all. But it turns out he was a fan of many of the same comics, being of similar age to me, fan of many of the same comics that I had been growing up. We'd grown up on kind of the same stuff,
Mm.
and the publisher knew this. The publisher knew this because they knew him. They'd worked with him on several other books, so they knew he would love to do this kind of thing. Um, and, the cool thing is, I've actually got the original piece of artwork for the spread where the aliens invade New York.
I love
Um,
that spread. It's so good because
and
it's
with
just
the
casually in the script, right? Like aliens invade New York, like they always do that.
No
Like
big deal.
Right, which is the beauty of yeah. I like the casual mention. Yeah, they always do. That's always where they and all that kind of thing. And I love the little details, because here again you get what the artists add, where he's got the little old lady poking the alien in the eye with a cane and all that. But he's such a generous guy. He actually, his tradition has been to give the authors of books he works on the piece actually of original art of their choosing.
Wow.
And what he did in addition to that was he said, okay, you can have this big piece of original art. Also, you can have the rough art that led up to it. So
Wow.
it was a wonderful thing back in the day when I was presenting Perfect Man more often in schools. You know, I could say, well, hey, see, here's his rough work, because I can tell them about my rough work and whatever. But I mean, here's his actual rough little sketches and whatever leading up to this big thing here. And when it's this big piece of original art, it's all the easier to also convey to them, hey, you know, all that he used for this was pencil crayons and watercolor paints. How many here have used pencil crayons? Hands go up. How many have used watercolor paints? Hands go up. Well, the difference is not in the tools. The difference is he practiced and practiced and practiced. And by the way, he failed grade 10 art, you know.
And what a teachable moment. Like, I love that so much. My kid is often like, oh, this isn't what I wanted, or it didn't come out the way, you know, I had it in my head. And I'm like, buddy, I know, but like, this is how writing is. And so coming from that side, you know, I sympathize with what you're saying, but having the art and being able to show them the progression, I feel like that's got to be so impactful for a kid to be like, wait, this is what it took to get here. Like, I love that you took it in to show the kids. That's amazing.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, it's a sad thing though now is with him, and I guess, you know, a lot of artists is now that he's working entirely digitally, because he used to do the watercolor and all that, and now he's made the move to digital, and so there is no original art, you know, to bring in anymore. Though I mean, a person still could. I mean, I'm sure he has saved as files. He's saved
the layers, right? Yeah.
He keeps the layers, keeps on. So I mean, you could sort of print out something, you know, but I mean, it was nice that it happened when it did, when he was working that way, and it's all tactile and it's all these sheets of paper and his pencil marks on them and all that kind of stuff. So
my grumbly reflection on that is that, and audience take this as cheeky as it hopefully will sound, is that illustrators have it so good because anything that they produce from rough to final is more compelling than like the creaky drafty drafts that, you know. Point being, nobody's going to want a printed copy of any first draft of anything that I've ever written. It's not as attractive as any first draft of anything that's drawn.
No, because it's so immediate. It's so immediate. Right. You know, visually, it's like boom, you see this, you see that. Whereas you otherwise, if you're combing through a rough draft, you kind of got to look, okay, read it, and then kind of, oh, now I'll go over here, do the comparison to the final one, and okay, yeah, I see. It's just a more laborious process to actually see the difference. Whereas when it's with art, yeah, you can just see it. It's just instantaneous. Boom, I see that. That's it. Yeah.
And I want to take a moment. So we're talking about illustrations. I want to take a moment just to acknowledge authors credit your illustrators. Like we're doing, Troy, you're doing a fantastic job of crediting your illustrator.
Yeah, Dean Griffiths. Dean Griffiths is the name. So yes. Absolutely.
And if I remember correctly from the cover of Perfect Man, it's not written by Troy, illustrated by Dean. It's Troy and Dean.
Yep,
if I remember right. Which feels like an intentional choice.
Well, you know, it was an intentional choice, but not exactly in the way that you're thinking. I suspect, because the intentional choices is they were trying to make this like a comic book covers would look. So comic book covers, I mean, some of the comic book covers would say written by and drawn by, but a lot of them of them of certain eras wouldn't. A lot of them would just be this person and this person, because they've got the whole they've got like 30 special 32-page issue and a little blurb about is Perfect Man gone forever? Only Michael. So they really wanted to get that whole comic book cover vibe, and so really that's more a side effect of that than it is them being. I'd like to credit them with being that enlightened in the way of giving just that equal storytelling credit, but I don't know that that's actually the case, as it might just be sort of a happy side effect of them kind of looking at certain comic book covers of a certain era and going, well, that's how they write that. That's how they put that there. But I do love that about it, because I've always thought it's because it does, you do really meld. I mean, some of the favorite, even going beyond the sort of the written by and drawn by stuff, even like say somebody's favorite line in a book, it might be a line that the editor suggested verbatim, could easily be, or it might be a line that was very much inspired by, the writer sees the illustration and goes, oh, I got to change this to this now. And on the other flip side, in terms of visual notes and things, I mean, some of the art is the way it is as well, because the author was like, this ought to be like this in like a visual note or something like that. So it kind of goes both ways in terms of it melds so much that your favorite part might not be the ratio of who's responsible for what and when and where and how. It all just sort of just melds together into this one being anyway, in a lot of respects.
Yeah.
It's such a collaboration. Yeah. And that's a really good, and I just want to circle back real quick to what Josh said about, make sure to rep your illustrators. Justin Colon, the podcast sponsor, posted just recently and also made a really good point and said, if you are sending out queries and you are writing out those comps, include the illustrator on those books. It's not just, written by X, Y, and Z. It's also, written by and illustrated by, because that's so important. Like you can't have a picture book without the illustrator. You just can't. So rep those illustrators. This is a really good point to drive home.
Unless you're VJ Novak.
Yeah, exactly.
Nice. Well done.
I do.
PJ will be tagging you in the thread. Please come on.
Yeah, right.
Well, we're on the brilliance of and importance. I mean, the essentialness of everyone involved. The brilliance of some of the illustration here is I love how, and this was all Dean's decision, though maybe, the art director may have suggested some stuff too in this vein. But in terms of how you've got this question of, okay, Perfect Man quits, and then this teacher comes around who's this wonderful teacher who may or may not be Perfect Man. But the thing about that is what I had in my head, and thankfully I did not write this down in visual notes at all, was something really boring, like a Superman Clark Kent type of thing, where it's like, oh, the teacher has glasses or some whatever. But the brilliance of what Dean did here, there was a dilemma that he had to solve. Is like, okay, well, how do I have some sort of resemblance between the Perfect Man and the teacher? And if so, what? And what do I do? And so, number one, he has a helmet covering half Perfect Man's face, which I had no idea that was going to be the case, which I think is a brilliant solution. And the other thing is that they both have these big chins. So you've got the chin resemblance that, this is why, I mentioned sometimes an author might have some visual note that the illustrator follows to one degree or another. Well, sometimes, thank goodness, the author didn't say anything at all in terms of what the visual could be, because this was a million times better than what I had in my head from every angle, from every storytelling, visual interest, whatever angle you want, way better. So it's stuff like that is just lovely, because it just goes so far. It just elevates things so far beyond what you thought, which is what you want. You certainly want it to be a heck of a lot better than what you turned in. like the manuscript that you turned in, you want it to be much better than that. You don't want it to be just that, and it won't be just that, thankfully.
Well, so the way that you express it is a much more eloquent and beautiful way of thinking about not being too precious about your words. Obviously, our contribution as authors is really special, and books that are authored by us wouldn't happen unless we authored them. But leave room for being collaborative. Leave room for more creativity from the rest of the team. To this entire point,
absolutely, everybody on the team, everybody, the writer, artist, art director, editor, everybody, ideally they're on the team of team best book. That's the team they're on. They're not on the team. If after I'm a thing is accepted and I don't have to be quote unquote right about anything after the contract is signed. I mean, the editor can go, well, I think that this should be this instead. And if they're right, they're right. If the artist has a way of doing things that I never anticipated, and they're right. I mean, it's just all I want, and all I think most people involved want, is just what's the best book that we can put out. And the best ideas come from everybody. That's the best idea. It's this crowdsourced thing, and everybody contributes to that wonderful mix, and it really is an amazing thing to experience.
Hey everybody, time for a couple of mid-episode comments. Before we get to our weekly reviews, which are some really good ones this week, I did want to take a couple of minutes to talk about our Patreon, which we've started to kind of soft open, light fanfare lately, but I wanted to take a moment to acknowledge the awesome people who have joined us as some of our first patrons, aside from me, who just wants the stickers that are part of our Make It Sticky tier. So props to Jacqueline Lindsay, Stan Yan, Katie Reinert, and Jenna Johnson for being our first 4 patrons on Patreon. Thank you so much for supporting the podcast and helping us to offset the relatively light costs of putting the show on and keeping it fun and pleasurable, and hopefully getting some stickers and possibly some shout outs for your investment in the podcast. If you are interested in helping support the podcast, we've both got our Patreon as well as our separate shout outs that you can buy individually or license, however you want to say that, individually. Just go to our Linktree at linktree.com/verse show to find all the episodes, as well as the various ways that you can support the show, including merch as well. And now that we've gotten that bit of commercialness out of the way, let's shout out some other things that people have done. Brenna's review for this week is called Jump In, written and illustrated by Shadra Strickland. This book is, and this is exactly what Brenna writes, this book is -wow, all in caps. The rhythmic words and bright, vibrant illustrations make you feel like you're right there with the kids and even Ms. Mabel, who takes a turn. This book is summertime, wrapped in fun, rolled up in laughter. That's certainly a great endorsement. John's review this week is for Island Girls, Free the Sea of Plastic by Blair, Northen, Williamson, and illustrated by Svitlana Holovchenko. It's a wonderfully inspiring and easy to digest tale about the importance of oceanside conservation. In the story, sisters Sadie and Josie embark on a mission to save sea turtles from an unfortunate plastic situation. The book combines beautifully crafted watercolor illustrations with a powerful message that will be sure to encourage readers of all ages to help care for the environment. And true to John's reviews, John gives this delightful story 10 healthy sea turtles out of 10. I did not do my reviews based on a sea turtle rating scale, however, and hopefully that's okay. My review, I did this a couple episodes ago. My review is another kind of double whammy. This time pairing 2 different but similarly themed books together, whose themes are kind of acceptance and openness from family. Julian is a Mermaid doesn't need a lot of introduction, as I'm sure many of you who are listening to this are already very familiar with the book. It's a tale of Julian's fashion exploration. It's pretty well regarded for very good reasons, and is a touching depiction of the good that comes from having a supportive family open to, your own self-expression. But Fred gets dressed, and shout out in particular to our buddy Steph Campisi for turning me onto this book, is another take on a similar theme, and it's interesting reading these two together. We've got them both checked out from the library at our house right now. Fred, at first, has a chuckle-worthy romp through his house in the nude, which is very, tastefully portrayed on the page, but quickly follows similar beats to Julian, albeit for a slightly different age group. Both books really touchingly show the evolution in how both boys think about clothing, worry about how their clothing choice will be perceived, and are ultimately not only accepted, but fully embraced by their family. Two very different takes on a really important concept for families to understand together. Get out and review a book today, something that's, hits your household in a pleasurable way. Authors really appreciate it, and it does wonders for publicizing and enhancing the reach of some of your favorite books. And now, without further ado, back to our conversation with Troy.
So before we move on, or before, we take like a different thread here, just in case that happens, I want to talk about Stan Lee's review on the back.
I'm glad, because I was about to do a tangential question.
Oh my gosh.
So let's do that.
Okay, let's just do this real quick. Let me just read it so that the audience can hear, because this is so cool. Stan Lee reviewed your book and it got to be on the cover. That has to feel good, especially as a dude who comes from like a comic book background and you like grew up on this stuff. Stan Lee he's Stan Lee. So like to have it on your book is very cool. So, okay, let me just read it. It says, both the story and art are sensational. I hope it sells a gazillion copies. Excelsior, Stan Lee. It's kind of perfect.
And that almost didn't happen because I sent him, mailed him a copy of the book, suggested by the other person who's on there, Roger Stern. He responded to the book, responded to me about the book initially, and I asked him, well, I'd love to get this to Stan Lee as well. Do you have any thoughts? And he gave me a great suggestion, which was, okay, rather than going through Marvel, which everyone would do, there's this POW Entertainment that at the time Stan was involved in too, which is a much smaller entity. So he said, well, why don't you mail it care POW Entertainment, which I did. And the reason I almost did not get the emailed response was because it ended up in my junk email inbox, my junk box. And had I not checked it, I don't know if I was, now in time fades memory, so I don't know if I was like checking it because I was wondering if he responded and ended up there, or if I just randomly checked it. I don't know. But in any case, I checked it and it's like, oh my goodness, there's an email from Stan Lee sitting here. Oh my gosh. And so I almost, I don't, eventually it would have obviously gone from that, been trashed out of there. So that was a lucky break for sure. And one other quick tangential thing with Stan is that later on, I was editing and putting together a charity anthology of comics, which I contributed a little comic that I wrote. It was a charity anthology to benefit a primate rescue center. It was called Panels for Primates. And I had his email. So I asked him if he might like to contribute something small. It could just be even like a little comic strip, a few panels even. He could write something. And cool. And he said, oh, yeah, I'd love to do that. And then, time passes and he's a busy guy and whatever. And I was kind of wondering if it would actually occur. And then what was literally a dark and stormy night, it literally was, into my email inbox, and not the junk box this time, the actual thing, thank goodness, was a script, a Stan Lee script in my email for this 3-panel little comic strip. And so I approached this cartoonist who was a big supporter of the whole Panels for Primates thing to begin with, and he really helped with getting it where it needed to be, getting it to the venue it needed to be, and so forth initially. So I said to him, and I knew he was a huge fan of Stan Lee and the Lee Kirby Fantastic Four, all that kind of stuff. I mean, he'd even worked on one of the characters for a miniseries. So I said, hey, how would you like to work on this comic strip by Stan Lee? I mean, of course, I knew he would want to do that, but he's like,
no, I'm good. I'm
good. I don't think so. Yeah. But his initial response was twofold. It was, yes, of course, and I need proof that this is Stan Lee. So I was like, so basically, I forwarded him the exchange, the correspondence, which was, now and then, like every a few months or whatever, I check in with Stan. I wouldn't pester him, but I mean, just about, okay, are you still interested, whatever. So I emailed him that sort of correspondence that I would certainly not be technically adept enough to fake in any way. And so that was the only collaboration, the one and only collaboration that he ever got to do with Stan Lee. And it's really cool that it would have never happened without Perfect Man happening first. And I got to see on the social media later on, I got to see a picture of him and Stan together at a convention, kind of just kind of saying, hey, it was cool to work with you and all that kind of stuff. It was just a lovely little connection, and Stan was so generous to give, because everyone's I'm sure, asking Stan, could you do this? Could you do that? Could you do the other? And, my little rinky-dink charity anthology, he takes the time to actually give me a script, and actually took the time after it was illustrated to go, hey, could we tweak this line here a little bit for this reason? It was a good reason, a good tweak, so he didn't just it wasn't even him just sort of, oh, here's a short thing, phoning it in, not caring afterwards even. I mean, he even cared enough to be like, yeah, I think this line would land better thinking about it if it was like refined this way. And it was an absolutely excellent edit, and it was just a lovely thing to have been a part of, above and beyond him liking Perfect Man, which was, of course, it was and is a thrill, to be sure.
Gosh, well, and just such a delightful example of that actionable sort of advice or learning, which is just shoot your shot, take a chance, and hopefully who you're shooting your shot with also shares the belief that, once you're in a position to give back, like reach a hand down and do something that will be magical for somebody else in this way. That's a really wonderful story. Also, in terms of actionable advice, check your junk mail. That's the last piece of advice.
Yeah, check it now and then. You never know. I mean, it might not all be junk in there.
Yeah. I don't think in the intervening 20 years that the algorithms for junk mail have gotten measurably smarter, at least in terms of what I find in there.
Yeah, right. I mean, you would think it would filter for Stan Lee. They'd be like, oh, yeah, right. This clearly isn't junk. Like, whoever this is going to wants to read this. Like, please don't put Stan Lee's email in junk.
Well, I mean, it wasn't, to be fair, I guess, to the algorithm, it was not, not that I need.
That's kind of you, Troy.
It's too charitable.
It wasn't Stan Lee at such and such. It was an interesting, I can say it now, because I mean, I guarded it jealously at the time, but it was an abbreviation of Comic Book Man. Not every letter was in there, and it was at AOL.com, but it didn't have Stan Lee. It didn't have Stan Lee. Of course it did, but it didn't have Stan Lee in the thing, so
totally.
That much slack I'm going to give the algorithm.
Love the reality. Love the curtain pullback that Stanley had an AOL email address.
Yep.
Totally. And that fits, like, everything I know about Stanley is mostly based on the Kevin Smith and Mallrats movies, because he did, he did a cameo, and I love Jay and Silent Bob, love them. And I also, I have a bunch of old friends who just were very much these comic book junkies in college. So I have a good understanding of, like, who this guy is and the sort of reputation that he has. And I always got the sense that he was just like a really genuine guy. He was a good guy. And so, like, I love hearing that he responded about this charity anthology, and that he, cared enough to do the tweak, because that fits with everything I know about him.
Well, and actually, in terms of other actionable advice, one of the things that he did, which was amazing to me as well, is he was quite a quick responder to emails that were sent, but he would not go on and on. It would be quick. It would be a quick. He had that gift of doing a quick email, but quick and amiable and friendly, though. All at the same time, just succinct though. So it's like, okay, you might not, as whoever you are, in terms of somebody making an inquiry of you or a request of you or whatever it is, and you might not have a lot of time. None of us do, but if you can shoot off a relatively quick email, keep that friendliness, keep the quickness, and everything else. That's that's what Stan did. And he's obviously a busy guy with lots of demands on his time. And so that also, it was instructive to me. It was instructive to me because obviously occasionally, I don't get just a deluge of requests like him, but occasionally people will ask for my advice or this or that. They'll email me via my website or whatever it is. And I don't quite master his concision, but I try to do pretty well with the quickness, at least, and I'm working on the concision. As a picture book author, that's something that I should be decent at anyway.
Yeah, that comes in
short
revisions.
And kind is pretty important for picture books.
Pretty important.
Yeah, right.
Pretty important. And
Right.
he had it. He had that. So he could have been a picture book. Well, he obviously did a lot of, but yeah, anyway.
He was a picture book author after a fashion. For a different age group.
No.
Before time gets away from us, I want to kind of just explore history stuff with you, though. The market, there was no Twitter back in 2003, 2004, even earlier, when you must have been shopping this around, in terms of how you learned the business and how you explored it, and how you went about creating the book as a whole. One thing that stands out is Perfect Man is a wonderful book. It is text heavy by today's editorial standards, which I love. But some of my favorite picture books are way wordy, very, very much too wordy for today's editorial standards. So I guess I'm curious in exploring or just getting your reflections on how things have changed for you and how you've been forced to adapt sort of to market over the past 20 years or so.
Well, definitely there's been a shift in terms of picture books where the age range is. So, this is partly why this is was as wordy as it was, because while there were your Where the Wild Things Are and various ones that were obviously far less wordy, there were quite a few that were as wordy as this out there at the time, partly because the upper end of the age range for picture books was higher than it is now. So a big part of the adaptation is simply that concision, getting things much more concise, and honestly getting the pictures to do a lot more of the work, of course, because Perfect Man is more of sort of an illustrated prose type of thing than it is the words and pictures collaborating as fully as they could in terms of the storytelling. I mean, there's certainly things,
right?
Yeah, very much. And I think part of what I've learned can even be illustrated within what I would do with and to Perfect Man now. I mean, I would, in fact, there's a whole spread, the first spread where it's saying, oh, Michael Maxwell Callum, smallest boy in his school, talks about Michael. Perfect Man, greatest superhero of them all, talks about Perfect Man, that whole first spread there. If I were to do that today, that would be gone. I wouldn't have any of that there. I would simply start with the phrase on the next page, which says, Michael Maxwell McCallum was Perfect Man's biggest fan. Boom, in. You know?
Right.
So there's a lot of things like that. And I suppose in terms of the contrast between this book and my most recent book, Hat Cat, I mean, it is, you could not get a more extreme contrast in terms of the, word count and how much information is thrown at you with Perfect Man versus how, in some ways, how much isn't thrown at you with Hat Cat. So that's been a big adaptation, I suppose. I mean, the weird thing is one of the things I was worried about with Perfect Man at the time was how didactic it is, and how, I mean, it gets away with it for a lot of reasons in my view, but it certainly is, because that was viewed at the time as a big no-no. I think it's viewed slightly less so. Well, maybe significantly less so now, but it's only if you pull it off in a different way than Perfect Man pulls it off. Put it that way. I mean, there are books that are entirely about what the teaching thing is. They're like, sometimes it's like right in the title what the teaching thing is. Like this is not an example, but if there's like something that says, there could very well be a book that says not quite this wording, but say, be courageous, and that could be the title of the thing. And it's telling you, oh, here's all the ways you can be courageous, but it's doing that, like it's doing it in a vastly different way than Perfect Man's kind of message telling. Like it's a really different way. It's a much more breezy, flowy, quicker way, I guess, too, because Perfect Man is fairly text heavy, but it's also, and because of that, partly because of that, it's a slower book too. It's a slower book, despite the fact that it's got an alien invasion and all that kind of stuff, but it's still a slower book. I mean, you've got this huge, everything goes to a screeching halt for a huge conversation between the kid and his teacher that goes on for quite some time. I mean, I think it works because there's this tension in there of, well, okay, is this advice that a teacher is giving him, or is this advice that a teacher who is his favorite superhero is giving him? So there's this tension in there that kind of keeps it kind of moving forward. But but in terms of change too, yeah, you're right. In terms of the internet community and so forth, like the Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, but the Kidlit community that's online on various platforms and so forth. I mean, that's an amazing thing that I'm so glad is there, because I personally am discovering so many more creators and connecting directly with them, and I've behind the scenes, DM'd a lot of them, and they've DM'd me kind of going, hey, just for advice or for encouragement or for whatever it might be. That is great. And it's an embarrassment of riches, really, compared to, back in the early 2000s, the early aughts, when there was not really any of that. What was it? There was it the yellow board or something? What was it called? Oh. There was a message board type of thing where people who were writing children's literature material, even then, that was there, and I was more of a lurker than I was actually posting questions or whatever. A lot of my questions were being answered or being asked by others or whatever. But so I did go on, and I think it was Yellow something or other. I did go on that message board a fair bit just to get a sense of what response times people were finding, just all the kinds of info that you would get even more so today. But what was it? There was like the children's writers and illustrators market or whatever, that big book. I mean, I would definitely be looking at the most recent ones of those and going on to lots of publishers' websites and seeing what they want, all that kind of stuff. So the internet was there. It was just not nearly what it is now. Not nearly as back in my day, we had it so much tougher, type of thing. But
we're not talking ancient history or anything, but it is striking how much it's evolved for sure.
Yeah. But I mean, I will say that what it seems like is the market has only gotten worse and worse and worse and worse. I mean, just in the sense that I remember at some point after Perfect Man, I remember meeting with an editor in Toronto, and she was saying, well, this story and that story that you've pitched, this would have sold at an earlier time, but now the bar has just been raised and so forth, and it just seems like that has continued to occur to a greater and greater degree, which is you just got to go with that. But it just seems like that, because it seems like I heard her. I said, okay, I hear you, and so I'm going to up my game. And then, I sort of up my game, and then, the bar's raised beyond where I up my game to now. Great. And it just seems like, that you're chasing that all the time. You're chasing that, and the other thing is sometimes you might find that the type of thing that you want to write during whatever period of time, it's just not the thing anymore too. So there's various shifts and so forth, and a lot of those shifts are for great reasons and much needed, but you're always sort of adapting to how can I make the Venn diagram work of sort of what I want to do, what really jazzes me as a creator, and what is needed on all kinds of other levels as well, So that's a tricky one, but that's an ever evolving one. That's always been the case.
Yeah, I mean, bottom line is not, as we've talked about on other episodes, is not to adapt yourself to what you see as the market, because you're always going to miss the mark. It's just make your game the best it can be and follow your passion. And, if you're not chasing this immediate sense of urgency and have a little patience, networking and hard work will get you there. Right.
Yeah. And on that note too, I was going to say that's kind of a perfect transition into, so we're edging up towards the hour, Troy. And it's been such a delightful conversation. This has been so great. But what I was going to ask is, are you waiting for anything new to come out? Is there anything in the works? Are you sort of like, waiting to promo something, or can you tell us anything about, the behind the scenes?
Well, I believe when this, it's an interesting thing because this'll be dropping a fair while after we were chatting. So there could very well be some things that I have news about when this drops that I don't have now. I mean, I just got news yesterday of something going to the editorial board in September.
Okay.
So, which I think, I really love. Like, there's some changes that were suggested that I love that make it work even better as far as I'm concerned. So who knows? Maybe I will know. I will know one way or the other, but I don't know as we speak now. And then, And then in October, my first Halloween story is going to be in a kids magazine, but that'll be in the rearview mirror when this drops. So really, at the point of this, I mean, what's going to be going on that I know is going to be going on is I will be celebrating the 20th anniversary of Perfect Man, and I've got all kinds of different folks that I'll be talking to. You're actually the first people
all
Stop
right.
on your publicity tour.
First
Yeah.
stop on that. So this has been wonderful in that regard. Wonderful anyway. It's been lots of fun. So that's really right now what I know for sure is that there's going to be lots more folks that I'm going to have a blast talking to, and I'm going to be giving away lots of copies of Perfect Man and all that kind of stuff. So I know that's happening. I will say that there is one book that I would define as being the sort of book on my bucket list, the one. And I finally got it to a place where, I mean, I think I mean, obviously everything can improve, but I think, oh man, this is lovely. It's lovely. And it's one of those ones that's the one above all others that I have to get out there in the world. I mean, I might even, if I had to, maybe I'd even self-publish it, which is not really a route that I ever really want to go. Yeah. But maybe for this one, maybe I would if I had to. I don't think I'll have to. I really don't. I think it will find a home somewhere. And so I'm excited about that one. So yeah, as always, many irons in the fire, and who knows what what will happen.
We'll keep our fingers crossed for that one. And then can you tell us when the actual Perfect Man 20th anniversary is? Because we can coincide the podcast dropping with that anniversary, so we can, be part of the hype.
Well, the actual is April.
Okay.
That's the April of 2024 is the actual, but I mean, this could even January is fantastic, honestly, because January is the year. January is the year.
Yeah, perfect.
It's like boom, new year. We're first out of the gate, new year with all of that. So, but that's the actual.
Yeah, great. No, that's awesome. And I know you said you wanted to do a giveaway coincided with the podcast, so maybe January is good, and we can do the giveaway, and then whoever gets that book can also will be part of it and sort of can be like, this book is amazing, and can review and all this stuff and help get everything going, because that's so exciting. I'm really excited about it because I love Perfect Man.
Yeah. Oh, thanks. Well, how could you disagree with Stanley? How
that's right.
Right.
Respect his memory and his opinions.
There we go. But no, this has been so much fun. Thank you so much. I'm so glad that I know that this has been a while in coming and everything, but it's been well worth the wait for me, from my end anyway. I've really, really enjoyed this, and it's just been lovely talking to you.
Thanks for listening this week.
Find all of our episodes and other associated links and information at linktree.com/verseshow.
Or reach out to us on Twitter. Thanks again, and we'll see you next verse.
Bye.